Let's talk bugs. iOS 16 bugs to be exact. I'm going to be referencing my iPhone 14 Pro in this video, as that's the one that I've used iOS 16 on most heavily. But of course, this applies to several generations of Apple products running iOS. So I've seen a lot of visual bugs. I've seen Tech Odyssey had that one where the always on display, the lock screen basically put itself in landscape mode, and that was it. It locked itself there. I've seen some other ones on Twitter where people were having their dynamic islands actually go in landscape mode and locking themselves as well. But the biggest thing, and the one that worries me the most, and I'm sure they're working on it, is that people complaining about the UI being a little slower. And I've experienced some of that. You can see I've turned off my always on display because for me, that was the bulk of where the issues were. And as Apple users, when we get a lot of garbage kind of feedback on Twitter when we put out stuff like it just works. But it just works doesn't mean bug free. It just works means that the front end stuff is usually pretty smooth. It's pretty intuitive. Stuff is glitch free in terms of you don't see how the sausage is made. I noticed more things going wrong on this always on display, whether it was the screen didn't know whether it needed to be dim or it needed to be bright. It didn't know whether it should be trying to recognize my face for face unlock or it shouldn't be, or if it should be off to the side. So that was, and then when I'd open it up, sometimes it would be in the dim mode and I'd want it to be in the bright mode where I wanted it to activate, and I was tapping it, nothing would happen, and then I'd have to swipe up or lock again and then swipe up. That's kind of the errors that I was getting. Once I turned off the always on display, all that stuff went away and it started acting like a regular iPhone like from before. So if you're suffering from those visual glitches, if you're someone suffering with some of that UI stuff, perhaps if it's front end on the always on display, go ahead and turn that off and see if you're getting a better experience. Other stuff, I had one dropped call. That's not crazy. That could have always been AT&T. I didn't get a lot of the stuff with iMessage that people are having. I haven't had a lot of the other stuff that people are having in terms of different issues with the AirPods and other stuff, connectivity things there. In fact, if anything, which is not saying a whole heck of a lot, but connectivity has actually been pretty good on my iPhone 14 Pro, better than previous generations. Wi-Fi, for some reason, has just always been bad on iPhone for me. Always been bad. Sometimes I shut it off, I turn it back on. It's just never quite right. But this year, I've had no issues with Wi-Fi. I haven't had to turn it off once, which is actually pleasant for a change. I could keep Wi-Fi on the entire day. My battery life is completely turned around as well with 16.0.2. I'm now getting, today would be upwards of 8.5 hours of screen on time. So that's pretty darn close to what I was getting in the iPhone 13 Pro. And if it could get back to that, at least there's something to be said there. So they are working on stuff. 16.0.3 apparently is going to be this week or early next week. And then we have 16.1, which is going to be the big patch coming out in a couple of weeks. But for Apple users, this is a new experience. This has most certainly been the buggiest update that we've had in recent years. And that was coming off the heels of last year, for me personally, being the buggiest update that we've had with iOS 15. I had problems with the Mail app. I had some other issues going on with iOS 15 that they did sort within 2 or 3 weeks. They were sorted. We'll see what happens this year. You know, they do get some of the benefit of the doubt. They have built up some goodwill there in terms of how they solve different issues with bug fixes and how they work on it. But you don't get to use that forever. You know, that starts to wear off after a while. If you keep releasing devices that are not quite ready and software updates that fix some of them but don't fix other ones, you're going to be put on a plane with everybody else. And that's somewhere where Apple doesn't really want to be. Trust me. If they start having to be compared to other manufacturers, Android manufacturers, on features because their software is kind of in the same boat as everybody else, you know, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Maybe we'll get a good update, maybe we'll get a bad update. Apple doesn't want to compete on features. They have to make sure that their software experience is head and shoulders above the rest. That's what they've survived on for these past couple years. And that's especially true this year with the iPhone 14 Pro. And that's why I think a lot of people are noticing more stuff as well. You know, when you're winning, it's like in football. You're winning ball games, nobody cares about that pass you dropped in the second quarter. All swept under the rug. That's it. Don't worry about it when you're winning. But you're losing, everything gets called out. Every little thing you start to notice. And when you have substandard release, I would say substandard is tough. If you have kind of blah releases, like the iPhone 14 Pro, you're going to get people starting to notice other things. And they just narrowly avoided this last year because the iPhone 13 Pro would have been in the same boat if it weren't for that outsized battery life that saved it and made it worth upgrading to. But it doesn't have that this year on the iPhone 14 Pro. In fact, right now, the battery's just a little bit worse. So what is the major thing that's getting people excited about this phone, making them think they're winning with this device, and making them stop looking for reasons to not like it? And they're not to say that people are making up these things. These are actual legitimate bugs that people are having. But I'm saying if it doesn't affect the overall user experience, sometimes those are things that get enhanced a little bit more than they would have normally. Overall, the day-to-day on my iPhone 14 Pro has been good. It's been smooth. I've enjoyed it. The promotion is good. The performance is fine. I haven't had app crashes. I haven't had system crashes. I haven't had UI crashes that a lot of people have been having with these devices. But it's overall, you could tell that it's a little bit more, it's a little choppy compared to previous versions of iPhone and iOS. So that's something that is absolutely jarring as an Apple user, having used their devices for 15 plus years now, since that was something going back to when Steve Jobs was nitpicking about smooth scrolling and the way that the pages would have to rubber band so you wouldn't have that kind of jolting, jarring eye visualization when things would just kind of stop and be a little abrupt. That's different now with this. And I don't like to see them go away from that. I don't like to see them go away from a time period where you could just say, oh, these just work. They just work. It's nice and smooth, no issues. You know, Twitter's great. Could go ahead and go in here and we nice and smooth, the whole thing. It just works. There's no hiccups and there's no lag. And there are little hiccups and lag. Little things. Does it affect the overall base experience of the phone? Does it make it unusable? Does it frustrate me? Do I want to yell and scream about my iPhone? No. And you've seen I've yelled and screamed about devices before. But that's because it got in the way of my everyday usage. There were system UI crashes. I couldn't get into the darn thing. This one I have no issue. Face unlock works fine. It's just those bugs with always on display that have now 90% been alleviated by me turning off the always on display. Always on display needs a complete redo. Always on display, they need to go back to the drawing board and figure out a way to make this more intuitive. First, the process of selecting them has to be more intuitive. It's very un-Apple the way they did this, where you go into these different modes, and then you can have widgets on some pages, and then you click them, but you're in focus mode, and then you go into customize, and then you plus it. It was a very un-Apple setup. Should be a whole heck of a lot easier than this. And then when you're switching between them, that's nice and easy, and that's fine. But the always on display was not adding anything. It doesn't add anything to me. I know technically it's impressive that they can have an entire display on the entire day and only drain, X amount of battery. That's fine. But this is a horrible mess at the bottom when you're trying to just get information at a glance. So I turned it on. It was more distracting than anything. I look over, I'm driving. I look over in the driver's seat. It looks like the phone is on, number one. And then you're trying to, well, is that a text message? Is that a real text message? Is that a call? And you're trying to tilt, and you're working during the workday. I sit there, and the text message will be there forever. Disaster. Total redo needed on this. So while they're doing that, they could go ahead and straighten out the different software bugs that they've had with iOS 16. The one thing that you can always take comfort in is the fact that they do work on this rather aggressively. It is important to them, the user experience, because that's their thing. It's not technical cutting-edge advancements anymore. It's the user experience being smooth and just working. So they understand that. They're not stupid. They at least know that that's something that they're going to have to shore up. And that's why we've had, I think, 1, 2, and then we're going to have 3 updates in 3 weeks with this device once 16.0.3 comes out. I think they're going to get it right. But you got to do it. I could think that, I can anticipate that, but it's got to actually happen on the device. They don't get a free pass forever. And while it's not annoying yet, if these other devices start to break other things, other updates start to break other things, or maybe there's some snowballing effect with other problems that show up on the device, then I'll be annoyed. Because that's very un-Apple. So they're on edge right now. Could go either way. I think at the end of the day, you pick this up, you're going to be fine. It's an overall excellent experience for 95% of the day. But there are more of those little things that you notice that you usually never notice with an iPhone device. If you've made it this far, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Until next time, have that Steve-licious day.